So what I want to do is I want to talk about this fairly surprisingly controversial subject of the people of Israel. Not necessarily the citizens of the current Jewish state of Israel, but when the Bible talks about Israel, who is it talking about? And what does that mean for us? And I think this is one of these concepts, there's probably just a handful of concepts in Scripture that once you understand them, it changes the way you read the entire Bible. You can read the entire Bible cover to cover over and over and over again, and if you don't understand this, you'll read it in a completely different way. But once you do understand it, it's transformative. It changes every aspect of your life. You start to realize who God is speaking to when. You start to connect all the dots. You start realizing what actually does apply to you and what doesn't. And what it really gets into is the issue of identity. And I think for us as believers, we talk a lot about our identity in Messiah, our identity in Yeshua. But what is that? Does it just mean that we're Christians? Does it just mean that we're disciples of the Lord? Does it just mean, what does it mean? How does God view us? And how has God viewed his people throughout the course of history? So that's what I want to talk about a little bit today. Cases that the lost sheep of the house of Israel that we read about throughout Scripture are both Jews and non-Jews. It's not just the Jewish people. It's not just the Jewish people 2,000 years ago. A partial hardening has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. So Paul is saying that the reason why these Gentiles are being grafted in, the reason why this is possible, the reason why this whole mystery, this plan is being executed, is because of the fullness of the Gentiles. And who was described as being the fullness of the Gentiles? It was the tribe of Ephraim. And so what Paul is saying is that until Ephraim comes in, Israel's not going to be restored. The reason why Gentiles are being brought to faith is because God is restoring Ephraim, the lost tribe, the northern kingdoms. And so the key thing is to remember that faith is what makes us Israel. A lot of people get really anxious and antsy when you start talking about Israel and these sorts of things. They get very sensitive about it. I don't know why. The Bible's pretty clear about it. Faith is what makes us Israel. Scripture says that he's going to have a new covenant with the house of Israel. If we're new covenant believers, we have to be part of Israel. If you're Israel, you're Israel. And we all get there through faith, just as it has always been for God's people. Abraham believed through faith. Isaac, Jacob, the tribes of Israel, they all got there through faith. Continuum. The legacy of faith that we are walking in today stretches right back to Abraham. The promises are still true. The promises are still valid. The things that we have to look forward to, our obligations are still real. Salvation has only ever come through faith. Being part of God's people has only ever come through faith. It has absolutely nothing to do with your bloodline.
The problem today with most believers in Messiah and Christ is that they don't understand who they are. It's an identity crisis.
The whole time that I was growing up in the church, and I'm most grateful for all the biblical instruction I received with my Christian upbringing, there were certain questions that could never get answered to any degree of satisfaction. Specifically, those questions of what is my identity? I'm an American who loves Jesus Christ. Well, what does that mean? Ultimately, why am I created and on this earth? And that's the big question. Well, now I have a much better answer. It's understanding my identity not just as an American who follows Jesus, no, but as a Hebrew. Because of Jesus, because of Yeshua of Nazareth, I have crossed over from death to life. And the identity that I was born with has been renewed or made completely new. I'm now Hebrew. I'm now a son of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, just as much as one who had been physically born into the family. What we must do is take ownership of that. Take ownership of that identity. Now search the Scriptures, make sure you understand it for yourself, and then act on it. When you read those stories in the Old Testament of the patriarchs and the kings and the prophets and all, it's not just some nice historical narrative. Now, that is our family story. When you read the scriptures like that, it is transformative. Just as transformative as the messages of the gospel of salvation in Jesus Christ that I learned when I was growing up. It radically reorients your understanding of the whole world. This is a message that I want people to know, because once you understand it, once you have internalized it, once you begin to walk it out, then you see, for one thing, all those Jews over there are not people who need to be saved. No, they're people who need to be supported and loved because they've held on to the land and the promises and the covenant while we have gone to squander our inheritance.